Right guys, it's Jerningam here. There's a helicopter on here, as I'm going to show you guys. So basically, like, there's a helicopter, there's a jet on the helicopter. So we're going to have a look at it. There we go.
Here's something you'll never have seen before. As far as anyone knows, this is the first time a Chinook has airlifted a Hawk jet. The helicopter from 27 Squadron, based at RAF Odium in Hampshire, lifted the jet at Boscombe Down, and are now heading for Old Airfield, where the Hawk will go into a museum. Hundreds of spectators have come out to get their photos, but they probably won't be as spectacular as the view from the camera mounted on the plane itself. Several of those flying today were involved in the recent Owen Bridge dam crisis, so they'll be well used to underslung. It behaves differently to a bag of aggregate. And the downdraft as the plane is lowered causes the jet to spin. Careful flying needed, but eventually the Hawk makes her final landing. And this particular plane is a special one.
XX154 was the first pre-production Hawk. It's got an incredible history. It spent its time up at Boscombe as a trials aeroplane. So it's a unique airframe, and for us to have it, it's fantastic.
But before the jet can go on display, she needs to be towed off the airfield. Wendy is doing this, not the driver, but the yellow machine. Wendy started off as a bomb loader, lifting bombs onto aeroplanes, but she's been repurposed into a tow truck. Plane safely delivered, a chance for the RAF.
If you guys like these type of planes and like these type of things, then you'd like this sort of video. I mean,
recently the Whaley Bridge to 105 guns, other different aircraft, and even ourself is one of our special skills.
This Hawk is the earliest in existence, and she's coming to her new home exactly 45 years to the day that the first Hawk flew. So I can't resist having a closer look. It is quite a thrill, I have to admit, sitting here in the pilot seat of this Hawk. Impressions, well, it's incredibly tight in here. I'm 6 foot and I'm touching everything, but all around in the space that there is information for me. A display of analog dials, a wonderful display, things like stopwatches, altimeter, speed, all that sort of thing. Dials continue alongside me. Would I like to fly this plane? No, I think I would just feel so enclosed and small up in the sky. But it's great to sit there. The Hawk will now be on display alongside a variety of airframes and artifacts, which showcase the history of Boscombe Down and the role played there in flight development down the years.
well, that was a very interesting video, guys. If you like that type of videos, like planes and warplanes, you'll like that kind of video. Right, so I've got to find another video I can show. You know, just do little clips of videos, as one would say to me, and some people do that and some people don't. It's it depends what you like to do, really. But yeah. You see, I'm not going to just give up with the channel, guys. I'm still going to be here. You know, I'm going to keep posting.
All right. Oh, that's all right. I'm so sorry. Okay, I think that is a signal for me. And thank you all for listening so patiently. So congratulations to all of you on what you are doing, and thank you very much for all that you are going to do, to all the risks that you're going to take, running towards danger rather than away from it, to make our country and our society safer. Thank you very much.
There's Boris Johnson there with all the police officers.
Thank you all very much. Flying it back all that makes it safer. Really, really done.
That was a very short video he did there. Just thinking, guys. Always thinking. That's one thing in life you never stop doing, is thinking and learning about things. So I need to find. I'm sorry if I sound a bit croaky. Right, so just limits. Just reading things on here, guys. Right.
Now, Brexit. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he'll die in a ditch before delaying Brexit again. Based on the last 24 hours, he certainly won't die wondering what he could have done to save the October 31 deadline he's promised. Reports in the British press overnight say the government is now going to challenge the new law to delay Brexit that Labour and Remainer Conservatives
They always keep
insist
delaying
on
Brexit.
Boris.
Going round the circle.
20 of them from the whip. Now, he
You can see my feet.
even if he loses a vote of no confidence, and he'll apparently stay in Downing Street and go to the Supreme Court to challenge the delay. Wow. I mean, by Friday, we all thought his best laid plans were in big trouble. Plan A was to stand down Parliament early and deliver his vision for the nation in the Queen's speech. Then go to Brussels to strike a deal, armed with his threat of a no deal on the table. Deal or no deal, Britain would leave Europe on Halloween. Standing down or proroguing Parliament meant less time for the Remainer quislings in the Tory party to plot against him. But last week, he lost his majority in Parliament. He lost his first 3 votes as a PM. Parliament then stripped him of his crucial no-deal leverage in Brussels and ordered him to go back to Europe and ask for yet another delay to withdrawal to January the 1st, 2020, or worse, such later time Brussels might suggest. So he then tried for a snap election on October 15, but that was voted down. He needed a 2/3 majority. He's trying again tomorrow for an early election, but
Yeah,
the
my
same
feet,
result
yeah.
looks inevitable. But Boris refuses to back down.
Can you make a promise today to the British public that you will not go back to Brussels and ask for another delay to Brexit?
Yes,
And
I
sorry,
can.
and would you
I'd rather be dead in a ditch.
so you would resign first, Minister, rather than go and ask for that delay?
I just don't. I really. It costs £1 billion a month. It achieves absolutely nothing. What on earth is the point of a further delay?
Now, in the Labour camp, leader Jeremy Corbyn does not want an early election. Even his own MPs think he would lose. A chlorinated chicken, the free-trading Boris labelled Jeremy Corbyn, and here he is in the sun. Now, this whole thing is a game of chicken, however. Labour knows it would lose an early election, yes, but Labour also thinks that if Boris fails to deliver on October 31, then Brexiteer Conservatives would desert the party because he's broken his promise. So, for Camp Boris, what are the options? Well, if he can't get an early election, he could call a vote of no confidence in his own government. Yes, the clock then ticks for 14 days for anyone else to form a government, perhaps a coalition of Labour, the SDP. But would the sacked Tories, which Labour would probably need, vote Corbyn, knowing they would be deselected in their own Tory seats? On the other hand, if Corbyn could form a government, might that fire up the silent Brexit majority for a November general election? The thing is, in that case, Boris would need Nigel Farage and his Brexit party, even if that means holding the Prime Minister's nose. Overnight, Farage, who's been waiting for this moment, put his offer on the table. He wants Tory candidates to stand down in Labour-held seats in the north, Brexit land, giving the Brexit party candidates free rein. In return, he'd stand down some of his 600 candidates, but they might split the Leave vote.
Got 630 candidates on the approval list, vetted, rare.
I like Nigel Farage's speech. Hopefully he can get us out of the EU with Boris Johnson, Brexit party.
Well, these are the protests outside Parliament on Saturday. Elephant traps are everywhere, not to mention the most violent.
Hopefully he sticks to his promise, though.
Speaker of the Commons, who has bent
One would say. We're going to have to hope.
No one knows what will happen next. Britons now identify themselves as Remainers or Brexiteers ahead of party loyalties. Even the PM's own brother and one of his ministers, Joe Johnson, a Remainer, has resigned, splitting the Johnson family. As I say, Boris is not going to die wondering.
So if you want Brexit sorted out before October the 31st, then please ask your MP to vote on Monday so that you can have your say on who goes to Brussels to sort this out.
They always say that, who sorts out. I mean, Theresa May couldn't get the deal through 3 times. Now it's going to Boris Johnson, then Tony Blair, then Gordon Brown tried, and then there's a lot of people that have tried to get the deal through for 3 years of Parliament for leaving the EU, and then pro-Remainers, and it's the MPs that are making us stay in. The MPs have got control. It's ridiculous. I mean, not all, I appreciate not all you guys follow politics or Parliament, but some people do. So that'll be a video for them to discuss or decide on. You know, that makes any sense.
Tony Blair, you've come here today to make an argument that there shouldn't be a general election. Some might think that an odd, even an uncomfortable look for a non-conservative politician. Why don't you want an election?
If there's a deadlock in Parliament and Parliament can't reach an agreement, and the Prime Minister feels his hands are tied, and Parliament is insistent.
This is Tony Blair, guys. If you don't, most of you don't know, was the Prime Minister of the UK a long time ago.
And we decide that the right way is to go back to the people to break the deadlock, then you should go back on the specific question of Brexit, because it was decided originally as a self-standing question on its own, and it should be reconsidered on its own. So, in principle, yes, of course, at a certain point there should be an election and decide what is the government. If Brexit is the reason for Parliament, and you want to resolve that deadlock, then you should ask the people specifically on the issue of Brexit, not mix it up with the general election where all sorts of other questions come into the mix.
But you have yourself made arguments in previous general elections that issues are decided in elections, whether it's 97, 2001, some of the big questions that you settled. Isn't it a bit odd you were making an argument that Jeremy Corbyn himself was a factor?
So the question is Brexit an issue that really is on its own out there as a different type of issue that crosses normal party lines? And the answer to that is yes, it is. And we know that because it was originally decided in June 2016 by a referendum. Now, if in the end Parliament can't agree what form of Brexit, and Parliament and government are in a situation of deadlock and you've got to break that deadlock, then you should go back by the same means that you originally took the Brexit decision. And the reason why I fear that the Conservatives may want to do a general election, not go back and ask people specifically on Brexit, is because they think they can mix the Brexit.
A lot of people talk about the news and do the news. That's what I'm doing. There's nothing wrong with doing news channels like this.
But say for whatever reason, so call them Premiership war. That's the wrong way of doing it. If the issue is Brexit, decide it on its own.
Lovely, who knows what's going to happen this week, but it looks quite likely you're not going to get your way and there will be an election and we might not get to a second referendum. In that election, would you vote for Labour and Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, it's going to be, difficult because of all the disagreements I've had with the Labour leadership. But on the other hand, I feel passionately about Brexit. So I think if it comes to an election, we're going to have to see is there a way that you can construct a majority in the country against no deal. But all of that just underlines why an election is not the right way to do this.
I'm not quite hearing a yes. Yes or no? Are you going to vote Labour?
You're hearing a qualified yes, but the anxiety is obviously because there are things that I don't agree with in the rest of the programme of Labour. That's precisely why you shouldn't force people to decide the Brexit question through the medium of a general election.
Forgive me, a qualified yes means that you might not vote Labour or you'll vote Labour with a heavy heart.
Well, a qualified yes means this, that I have big worries about the Labour Party programme. We have to see what the manifesto is, but my overriding desire will be to stop Brexit. Or a no-deal Brexit, which I think would be very damaging for the country. But,
and the Labour vote would definitely be...
Well, you can't say that, and that's why it's difficult to judge at this moment in time. I will do in an election whatever is best to stop a no-deal Brexit. But I think it's wrong, and I'm just an example of what will be facing millions of people if we have a general election. It's wrong to say to us that when the issue is Brexit, we're forcing you to make that choice in a general election where there are a host of other questions around security, the economy, state of the political parties that come into a general election. So that's why I'm not giving a definitive answer at this stage to that question. But the very fact that I'm not shows you what the problem is. The problem is that in a general election you'll be deciding Brexit, but you'll also be deciding a whole lot of issues that have nothing to do with Brexit.
So we'll move on into the future. We're 1 year on from the no-deal Brexit. Can you sketch out what you think that looks like? Has Britain done a deal with the European Union eventually? Has there been a change of government? Is there an overthrow? Are we still in a stalemate? people don't articulate what that outcome could look like.
The problem with saying what no deal looks like is literally that no country, modern developed country, has ever done this before. I mean, no modern developed country has ever deliberalized its trade in this fashion, and no modern developed country has ever gone out of its preferential trading agreements overnight with no agreement in its place. So when people say to me, what's no deal like? I always say, I really don't know. I mean,
if you can't articulate, how can you argue it's a bad thing? Politicians need to do that, don't they, if they're on that side of the argument?
For sure, it's an enormous risk. Now, is it difficult, or is it damaging, or is it disastrous? That's less certain. Although I think most people who've looked at this in detail say it's towards the disastrous end of the spectrum. If it happens, we're going to have to find a way of trying to make it work. And, you know, I've always said to people, once Brexit's over, if we've done it, you know, we're going to have to try and find a way of bringing the country back together and making it work. But it's because, you know, those of us who studied this think it really is an unacceptable risk to take that we're taking the position we are. And I must, look, everybody in the country is bored with Brexit. I'm bored with Brexit. Everybody is. But you can't, it's too big a decision to say, look, I'm bored, just do it. And that's where a lot of the public is, because the government's continually, both Theresa May actually, now Boris Johnson, continually saying, well, any of these MPs would stop being obstructive, you get their deal. But they're not. They're actually looking at the detail, which is what they're supposed to do in a parliamentary democracy. And they're saying, whoa, this is a difficult, difficult thing to do. And we can't responsibly just decide to do it because it suits a particular faction in the Conservative Party.
That has got a point to it, actually, I think. That he's trying to say that. He's right about that, what Tony Blair was saying. Sometimes you just got to think and think and think.
For me.
So let's have a look here. What's happened there? So I'm just talking to myself, guys, and filming on the phone, as you know. And I'm trying to find videos to show as well. I'm always doing a video, as you know. Where are they all? Just trying to find which is the latest things have returned. I'm going to be carried away again, aren't I?
Beneath the waves off the coast of West Wales, what could turn out to be one of the UK's most important crops.
Somewhere in Wales, this is about crops or something.
Seagrass is what they
Seagrass.
or at least its seeds.
The water in many places is not as clear as it is here.
Poor water quality has wiped out most of the nation's seagrass meadows, which are vital for many reasons.
It creates this huge kind of habitat that's really sort of complex and complicated for biodiversity to live in. So you get lots of animals, lots of fish particularly. Species like the Atlantic cod, the herring, they use seagrass as a nursery habitat. It's really important for all those big, economically important fisheries.
You guys like fish and seagrass, and you know, basically cook it in restaurants in the UK and food, and you like this sort of video.
All of us. They are excellent at extracting harmful carbon from the atmosphere.
In fact, they can do this 35 times faster even than tropical rainforests. And scientists believe that seagrass is key to providing a solution to climate change.
In a project supported by the World Wildlife Fund, Swansea University and Sky Ocean Rescue, 1 million seeds are being collected. They'll be taken to a lab and the shoots will be replanted in an underwater site in South Wales, the size of at least 2 football pitches. Wildlife expert Dr. Jenny Oates says politicians globally should stop overlooking the role that seagrass can play in reversing climate change.
Governments haven't been doing enough. Just in the UK, we've lost over 92% of our seagrass beds. But I think they're starting to realise the importance of this habitat as a protection for marine wildlife, but also as a really important way of addressing the climate emergency. So they really need to wake up to this.
It's hoped the operation here will prove that with political support, a mass reintroduction of seagrass meadows around the UK coastline and beyond can repair much of the damage inflicted on our planet, particularly over the past 100 years. Mike McCarthy, Sky News, Porthdin Line, North Wales.
Well, that was a very interesting video. I mean, let's see where I'm trying to look. Keep missing all the bloody... Keep going for most of these videos and I can't find which one's the right video. Oh, there we go. 3 hours ago. Let's see.
You don't have to search far on social media to find posts like these. Simple videos or still images advertising illegal drugs. It is a growing phenomenon, and the first definitive study has revealed 1 in 4 young people have been exposed to these ads. Even more alarmingly, those who carried out this research over recent months believe the number is now much higher. How many of you have ever seen an advert on social media advertising drugs? Every one of you. These teenagers say they've seen an explosion in the number of drugs ads on the likes of Instagram, Facebook and Snapchat.
Things like cannabis and just really like soft drugs. Everything's available now online on social media.
They're almost everywhere because in our current day and age, the internet and social media is in everything we do. So I think it is really worrying.
People can joke around.
I don't condemn drugs to anyone, but the thing is, I drink beer. Beer's a drug, tobacco's a drug. So that's a drug, coffee's a drug, chocolate's a drug. You know, but drugs are bad, and I don't agree people would do stuff like that. I just feel like you guys know, but everyone's different.
It has for them significant advantages.
But I do like to drink my beer.
They don't have to do their deals in dark alleys and on street corners.
Horrible, man.
And hard-pressed police forces simply aren't monitoring social media. But this former dealer says although the purchase of drugs on social media may appear benign, there are still risks.
You're still meeting some dodgy guy at the end of the day. You don't know like really what you're buying. You don't know who this guy is. It could be a scam for all you know. Like
a lot of scammers in this world, yeah.
On social media doesn't mean it's necessarily safer.
The advocacy group Voltfast, who commissioned the study, say the proliferation of drug dealers on social media has almost become normalised.
So most young people we see say, yes, we are seeing these adverts. And what we find, I guess, surprising is how unconcerned they were by it. For them, it's a normal part of day-to-day life.
The older generation, I don't think they realise that times have changed and they might not see it in the street anymore. If they're not on Snapchat or Instagram, then they still might not see it because it depends on who you follow.
I don't think social media is going away anytime soon. So the quicker we stop focusing on trying to stop the young people using these platforms and just educate them properly to deal with messages that the dealers may send is when we'll really start to make a difference.
Snapchat, Instagram and Facebook say they don't tolerate the sale of drugs on their platforms.
That's good.
And use the latest in technology to identify and remove users advertising illicit substances.
That's what they should be doing.
Sky News.
I agree with that. They shouldn't be posting stuff like that on there. I mean, to them it may be a business, but for other people it's damaging their lives and stuff. So that's not good. Good job that they're actually doing that, helping the community. Back in 2 minutes, I'm just getting myself a glass of water because of all this speaking I'm doing on this video. But anyway, who would know? Yeah, just get some water, then I can keep filming this video. No. Sorry about that, guys. I was getting a bit carried away there. I'm singing a song from a good game I like back in the 80s, I think. Right, so right. So about that, I had to go and get myself some water.
Quite a week. You tried to call an election and failed. You lost 4 out of 4 votes in the House of Commons. You saw your majority reduced from 1 to -45. You've seen Amber Rudd leave. You've seen Boris Johnson's brother leave. I mean, how would you sum up how this week's gone for you?
Well, it's obviously been a rough week, but the reality is the Prime Minister is sticking to his guns and what he said to get us out of this rut that we're in. We're going to keep going on with the negotiations with the EU. We want to deal by the end of October, but we must leave come what may. I think the country.
So they always keep backdating the date of the EU thing.
Surrender bill that Jeremy Corbyn backed this week with me. We've got to get out of that rut. And one of the reasons we want to get out of the rut is talk about all the positive things. We did also have a spending review this week, didn't mention that, where we talked about extra police on the street, levelling up school funding.
I wanted to emphasise that they're promising things about the more police on the streets, you know, more health in the healthcare and system, and
talk about those other things too. That's what the Prime Minister's doing.
The challenge, of course, is now to get Brexit done, of course, because things are perhaps got slightly more complicated, shall we say, where that's concerned. I want to address first the resignation of Amber Rudd, which happened overnight. She had some pretty stinging criticism, didn't she, of the party, and didn't just resign from the cabinet, but she also resigned from the Conservative whip. I mean, what does it say about the state of the Conservative Party when people like Amber just can't stomach it any longer?
I'm really sorry to see Amber step down. I like her, I respect her. We became MPs at the same time in 2010. But I think in fairness, when she took the cabinet role, everyone was asked, do you accept and can you sign up to and will you support the Prime Minister's plan to leave by the end of October, preferably with a deal, but if not, come what may.
I don't understand why people are so scared of leaving the EU.
I think he's right to expect it from his top team.
You say that it was right to install some discipline, but is this now becoming a party for Brexit purists? I mean, are you effectively now the Brexit party?
Well, no, I guess I'd say in relation to, first of all, what we've seen this week on the One Nation vision, more police on the street, they're grappling with school funding, making sure the NHS investment gets to the front line. That shows you we want to actually start talking about all the things, the bread and butter issues, if you like, voters.
Bread and butter
issues. Nothing that's
issues.
changed since, in fairness and with respect, since Amber took the cabinet role. She was asked.
Well, she thinks that the thing that's changed is that she doesn't believe that the objective is there to get a deal.
Well, I can tell you, having been in all of the subcommittee meetings and having been out to talk to EU foreign ministers last week, and if you look at the change, the question people actually the EU has gone from saying we can't touch the withdrawal agreement or reopen it to saying they're willing in principle to do so. That was a victory for the Prime Minister at the G7, and we've been following up on that. So actually there has been progress, but the one thing holding us back is this sense in Brussels that perhaps Parliament, through this surrender bill Jeremy Corbyn has led, would actually perhaps delay again or even cancel Brexit. We can't have that. It fundamentally weakens our negotiating position, which is why, with respect, I think the rebels this week were wrong.
Well, let's talk about the rebels, shall we? Because this is another reason that Amber Rudd said she just could not stand by. We can have a quick look at something she wrote in her resignation letter. I must also address the assault on decency and democracy that took place last week when you sacked 21 talented, loyal One Nation Conservatives. And she goes on to say, after that, the short-sighted culling of my colleagues has stripped the party of broad-minded and dedicated Conservative MPs. I cannot support this act of political vandalism. She says she can't stand by. Can you stand by?
Oh, of course. Look, the reality is, and I regret anyone that's had the whip withdrawal, and no one wants to see that. But let's be clear about it. This was because they voted for motions and legislation that gave Jeremy Corbyn control. Hold on, let's get a good point for people understand. Control of the business of the House of Commons and control of the negotiations. They were told in advance it would be a confidence issue. So they had a choice, and they didn't know the implications would be. First and foremost for the country, that's the real vandalism to democracy that's going on. And second of all, in terms of the whip being withdrawn. So I regret it, and we need to keep the family together. But the Prime Minister is very clear. One of the reasons with voters that we've seen an increase in support for the Conservatives is I think it's given a clear sense of direction. And now we're going to stick to the plan.
At the same time, though, you've kicked out former chancellors, people like Ken Clarke, who became an MP when Boris Johnson was 5 years old, people like Philip Hammond, who until 6 weeks ago, before he was kicked out, was the chancellor, people like David Gauke, it was the first time he's ever broken the whip. I mean, how many times have you broken the Conservative whip?
Well, not on an issue of confidence. And I've never.
It's been more times than David Gauke.
Well, no, but I've never voted to give.
You have voted on some big issues.
Sophie, let me answer the question. I have never voted to give Jeremy Corbyn control of the legislative agenda in the House of Commons or control over the Brexit negotiations. These are all decent people. I like them, I respect them. But it was right that the discipline was restored because they knew what they were doing. And I think the one thing we've got to have, you said that they were, you referred to status. I don't think your status in the party is the key issue. The question is whether you keep to your promises and you understand our promises we all made at the 2017 election and manifesto. You understand when you go into a vote like it was very clear how serious this was, giving Jeremy Corbyn that control over the House of Commons, over the Brexit negotiations. They did what they did knowingly. And I think Boris Johnson was right, and I say this with regret, in sorry not in anger, to follow through on that.
Do you think they should be offered a way back?
I think we always want to keep building bridges and to make sure that there are ways to keep the family together. But I think it's very difficult, having not just once but on a number of occasions now voted on those confidence issues with the implications that they've had, making it so much harder for us to get the deal with the EU that everyone in the Conservative Party wants. I think they've made that very difficult. But that was a choice that they made knowingly and aware of all the consequences and implications.
Is Dominic Cummings a member of the Conservative Party?
I don't know, you'd have to ask him. I don't know, I've never had a conversation with him.
He doesn't do interviews.
No, well, advisors advise, ministers decide. But actually, the key thing with all of this is that the people, and this is, I think, a big change, that we've got ministerial accountability. We didn't have that in fairness. My experience of Brexit with Ollie Robbins, with the greatest respect for the civil servants, and I think we do have that now. So I think it's right that elected politicians take responsibility like I'm doing on the show with you.
Do you think that it's a bit strange you don't know if he's a member or not?
No, there's loads of people that I don't ask those sorts of questions of.
Not loads of people advising the Prime Minister they've had.
Well, I don't have that. I can tell you, actually, I've never had that conversation with anyone that advised the Prime Minister. Actually, there's a story about John Mann, who's Labour MP, but helping us with some of the stuff, the position. This was an appointment under Theresa May originally in relation to anti-Semitism, when he's obviously not a Conservative. We want to be a broad church. Actually, the Conservative Party is at its best when we're a big tent, broad church, and we do need to keep the family together, and I want to see that happen. But I do also think that on some of these key issues, people need to understand, and the voters get it, that we've got to keep to the plan and stick to the plan. We can't delegate any of this stuff to Jeremy Corbyn. It's too dangerous by half.
Let's talk about the plan then, because I'm really keen to try and work out what the plan actually is. We discussed Amber Rudd's resignation a little bit earlier. Just want to have a look at what she said in her resignation letter when it comes to the deal, because she said one of the main reasons for quitting is, I no longer believe that leading with a deal is the government's main objective. The government is expending a lot of energy to prepare for no deal, but I have not seen the same level of intensity go into our talks with the European Union, who have asked us to present alternative arrangements to the Irish backstop. I mean, lots of people will read that and will be worried.
Well, first of all, it's not correct. Firstly, because we have had intense negotiations. David Frost, the political appointment, but the special advisor to the Prime Minister, Steve Barclay's been out. I've been out to Helsinki to speak to EU foreign ministers. I've seen a whole range of them to talk about Brexit, but also all the other issues we're working on. But also one point about the no-deal planning. Of course, that is crucial to getting a deal, because it sends the message to Brussels that we want a deal, we've set that out, but also that we're going to leave at the end of October if they continue to play hardball. So those two things are actually linked, and the big frustration I've got this week is MPs that have tried to take no deal off the table, explain that they want an extension. That sends the EU the wrong message at the wrong time.
I mean, the main thing stopping a deal, though, is the fact that you want to get rid of the backstop, but the EU says you have to come up with alternative proposals. Have you actually come up with some different plans?
There are clear whole range of possibilities. We've got the Prime Minister's letter, which sets out the framework for it. and David Frost and Steve Barclay have been working through the detail.
What are the? So, have you actually put forward anything?
So we've been engaged in discussions. What we're slightly reticent about doing, given past experience, is putting pieces of paper that will get leaked and rubbished by the other side. But the proposals would be around things like intelligence-led checks away from the border, exemptions for small businesses, trusted trader routes, making sure that we can look at maintaining the island of Ireland and not have any infrastructure at the border. All of those conversations have been ongoing. And actually, there's a really credible way to sort this problem out. But it does require political will in Dublin and from the rest of the EU. We'll continue these negotiations. The Prime Minister is seeing the Irish Taoiseach early next week. And we are committed, absolutely, to getting a deal. But one of the things that's crucial is that no deal isn't taken off the table. First of all, it's the responsible thing to plan for. But secondly, because it gives the EU that crucial message that we're serious about leaving and they need to move too.
Okay, well, let's try and work out what happens if you can't get a deal.
Sure.
If you take you at your word that that is still your main objective, but what happens if it doesn't happen by the deadline? Do you accept that the legislation passed by Parliament, the law passed by Parliament, compels Boris Johnson to ask for an extension rather than seek a no deal if he can't get a deal?
Well, first of all, the key thing with an extension is it requires agreement on both sides. I think it's very difficult for the legislation to micromanage in detail how that conversation will go. We will adhere to the law, but we'll also, because this is such a bad piece of legislation, the surrender bill that Jeremy Corbyn backed, we'll also want to test to the limit what it does actually lawfully require.
So what does that mean then? What does that mean?
We'll look very carefully at the implications and our interpretation of it to make sure.
In the courts, do you mean?
No, I mean, actually across the board, we will look very carefully legally at what it requires and what it doesn't require. I think that's not only the lawful thing to do, it's also the responsible thing to do. And again, I'll repeat, that legislation is lousy. It envisages multiple delays. It would effectively try and force us to accept conditions from the EU, however vindictive, punitive or harsh they may be. And if we ended up extending, Prime Minister made clear he will not do it, it would cost the UK taxpayer gross figure £1 billion each month. It's just a lousy piece of legislation.
The Prime Minister will not extend in any circumstances. Is that what you're saying?
He's been very clear about it this week.
So in that way, he would either ignore the legislation put forward, or he would resign.
We're always going to behave lawfully as a government. Of course, you'd expect that. And anyway, it will be challenged in the courts. But what we are going to do with that legislation is test very carefully what it does and doesn't require. And that's not only the lawful thing to do, I think it's the responsible thing to do. The irresponsible thing to do is to support that legislation, which weakens our negotiating position in Brussels.
Are you prepared to take it to the courts to test it, if that's what it takes?
We can't necessarily control that. The people at various points challenged the government over Brexit. We had 2 legal challenges last week alone, but we won both of those. But these things need to be very carefully.
So you're effectively saying that you are prepared to ignore this law that's been passed and then be challenged on it in the courts, if that's what it takes.
As you know, Sophie, that's not what I said. What I said is we're going to look at it very carefully, test what it legally requires and what it doesn't require, and that's the responsible thing to do because it's such a bad piece of legislation. And I think it was deeply irresponsible for Jeremy Corbyn to put his weight behind it. He's trying to drag this country into the quicksand, deeper and deeper. Whereas what Boris Johnson is trying to do is get us out of the Brexit rut and get the country moving forward.
I mean, some people will look at this and think this is an example of Boris Johnson effectively thinking that the rules apply to everyone else and he doesn't have to play by the rules.
No, I don't think that's true at all. What you're seeing is a Prime Minister that's made a series of very clear promises to get out of the EU, preferably with a deal, to talk about all the other issues like policing, schools, social care, and sticking to his word. I think, if anything, people are a bit surprised that he's sticking to his guns. He's keeping his word. I mean, that's what the voters expect.
Some are saying that he would even could even go to prison if he ignores this legislation.
This is ridiculous. Of course, he's not going to break the law, and of course, I think these are all politically motivated comments. But the reality is, you see from some of the polling that we've seen now just today with the Sunday Times and elsewhere, actually the voters recognise that we've got a Prime Minister that's trying to get us out of the rut, and you've got Jeremy Corbyn, who's got the handbrake on Brexit and is not allowing the country to move forward.
The problem you have, though, is even if it goes down well with the public, you've got to get to the election first, and you've been blocked from doing that.
And what a terrible look it is that Jeremy Corbyn, never in history have I ever known a leader of an opposition refuse to go to the polls to let the voters decide. It shows he doesn't trust the voters. And it doesn't say a lot about his confidence in his own ability to win that election. And I'm afraid that every Labour MP, again on Monday, when we're going to have a vote on this, is going to have to day by day explain that to their voters, why they're not allowing the country to move forward and they're not allowing us to resolve this with an election.
if it doesn't happen Monday, you're going to try again, bring it back?
We're going to keep with the plan, which is to get a deal by the end of October, if not to leave, on WTO terms. And if we can't get that through, of course we're going to, as a matter of necessity, not because we want it, go to the country to get their backing and the mandate for it.
Just want to have a quick look at something that Boris Johnson said during the leadership campaign. This is in July of 2019. I think the people of this country are utterly fed up with politicians coming back to them with more elections. It's totally wrong. Do you ever wonder why on earth people have such little trust in politicians when they say one thing and then a couple of months later they're doing exactly the opposite?
Look, the reality is we don't want an election, but it's been forced on us, and it was being forced on us because we don't have control over the numbers in Parliament. When that happens, everyone...
Not being forced on you, you're trying to make it happen.
No, it's been forced on us because we have so limited options because of this surrender bill that Jeremy Corbyn supported and led the charge on in the House of Commons. What else can we do in that scenario? So it's not something we want, but it's become a necessity if we can't continue with the plan. And actually, the thing that undermines people's trust in politicians is when they don't keep their promises. What Boris Johnson wants to do is keep his promises to get Brexit delivered, but also then to move on and talk about all the other things that we want to do with broadband, with levelling up schools funding, dealing with gripping social issues like social care. So I think he's sticking to his guns, and that's the right thing to do. And I think the voters appreciate that.
Talking about sticking to your guns, I remember interviewing you during the election campaign, and you said that the Conservative Party would be toast if you don't leave by the end of October. If we don't leave by the end of October, will you resign on that basis?
I don't think I ever said I was going to resign. What I'm going to do is redouble our efforts to get a deal, but in any event, to leave by the end of October. I think that's the right thing to do. Of course, if we can't do that, it's very clear that the blockage is Jeremy Corbyn, the Liberal Democrats and others who are not willing to respect the referendum. And in the Liberal Democrats' case, they say if there's a second referendum and people voted, they wouldn't respect that either. And I think people will say this comes down to politicians keeping their promises, and it's about trust in our democracy. I'm doing everything I can to make sure I keep my promises, and the government of the day under Boris Johnson delivers.
Could you still be part of the government that extends it?
The Prime Minister has been absolutely clear on this. We're not extending. And I think it's very dangerous. The reality is, what are the problems that we've got? What are the challenges that we've got? It will get easier if we extend it again. I've been fucking hoes and popping pillies, man. I feel just like...